You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal from somewhere beyond the status quo, here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. I believe that Rebelpreneurs are intrinsic leaders. Anytime you're leading people to action, creating transformational results in their life, I think that you are in a leadership position by default, so you have to own that and you have to step up into that and get really good. If you're not comfortable with that, today's expert is going to help us dial in your leadership skills. I'm speaking with Mahyar Rostami. He is a U.S. military veteran, and for the last 11 years, he has trained leaders, government agencies, and teams to develop the character, trust, and vision required to build influence and achieve their organizational goals. He is a leadership consultant and a certified speaker for Vistage Worldwide, as well as the John C. Maxwell Team, and he holds numerous credentials in the principles of instruction from the United States Air Force, where he tenured as an Airman Leadership School instructor. He is the founder of Build Your Vibe, and he teaches CEOs how to lead with military confidence. I love that. Mahyar, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Dude, thank you for having me, Ralph. I appreciate it, brother.
Joining us from sunny Southern California, where there's a whole lot of shaking going on.
Yeah. Well, I've been told it's not quite because of the earthquakes. It's because I landed back here in my hometown.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, you were shaking things up from top to bottom wherever you go. So you've got the military perspective on leadership. I love your brand, Build Your Vibe instead of Build Your Tribe. That's a great turn of phrase there. You have an interesting history and interesting background. I want to jump right into, before we get into your background, you have a contrarian view of motivational speakers and life coaches. Your website says you don't need another motivational speaker. You don't need another life coach. You need architects. Explain that. Why is that? And what does that mean?
Yeah, man. You know, when I say that I need an architect, when I say that you need an architect, what I mean is that the structured life, to be able to fashion your life, is, I believe, the most effective way to go about this experience. You know, I've just had a lot of conversations about this recently. I had someone come up to me and want to have a little bit of my time and ask me, how do you become a motivational speaker? Here's how you become a motivational speaker. You do something significant and then you talk about it later. You don't set out to become a motivational speaker. I don't believe that there is anything prestigious about that. I don't believe that there's anything commendable about that. What you're basically asking me is, how do I set out to BS people and send them off out the door chasing their dreams? How do I just get people riled up and feel good about my words? That's not motivational. What is motivational is, you know, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, and I can see all the books of the stories of people who have done something significant, who have made an impact. And that, to me, is something that drives me to do things in my life. That, to me, is something that drives me to want to make an impact in my personal sector of the universe. I don't want to set out to make people, you know, feel good with those warm and fuzzies and the kumbayas. I really don't think that that's the right approach. I think the cart is before the horse on that one.
I really love that viewpoint. It's very different. It's not in the status quo, and that's really what makes you such a great fit for Rebelpreneur Radio, breaking the rules and building the business you need so that you can live the life that you want. And that's all about designing that business. And that's where the idea of an architect or a strategist comes into play. It's figuring out what you want and then developing a blueprint, a plan, a strategy for getting there. And no doubt your view of leadership was certainly honed by your military experiences. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you got on this path of teaching, and then how you got on the subject of being an expert in leadership.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So a little bit about myself. I'm a first generation Iranian American. I was born in Los Angeles. I joined the Air Force because of my dad. My dad was in the military, but he wasn't in our family business. He was in the Iranian military back in the 70s. And if you remember, and the listeners remember, back in 1979, something significant happened back there, and we had a regime change. My dad finished his time in the military. In fact, he told me a great story about how at one point in time, at the height of his military service, before he exited the military, he was sifting through a burning pile of passports to find that of his own and those of his friends. And he was able to leave the country, and he came to the U.S. He finished his degree in aerospace engineering, and he wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force. Well, at the time, we weren't accepting non-U.S. citizens into those roles, and my dad had to chase a new dream, but I joined the Air Force to be the man my dad wanted to be, and I got to do that, and I did that for many number of years. At one point, at about my 8-year mark, I was a staff sergeant in the Air Force, and I realized I wasn't so much in love with my normal job. I was an engineer, and I was craving something more. And I realized that I could do more if I got to be around more people. I was asked to become an Airman Leadership School instructor, and I got this wonderful opportunity to take 16 airmen for 24 academic days, 7 times a year. And I got to shape them, and I got to mold them, and I got to teach them the leadership principles that have worked for me as a non-commissioned officer. And I got to take them through this experience of patterning their approach as a supervisor and a communicator. And I'll tell you, man, I've never had a greater honor in my life. I got to shape and mold our nation's sons and daughters, and that motivated me for the rest of my life. That gave me an energy and a spark that I don't think anything else will ever give me. So I took that, and after that ended, all great things come to an end, and they give way to greater things. And I had to go back to my normal quote unquote job in the military. I returned and I said, dude, this is not cutting it for me. And everyone said, man, you love teaching, you love speaking, leadership is your thing, man. Why don't you get out and chase this full time? And I ended up taking everyone's advice, and I got back to Los Angeles 8 months ago. And since then, I've been picked up. I actually got picked up day 4 out of the military to speak professionally with a company. I partner up with them. They tap me, and they ask me to speak all around the United States to CEO groups. And I get to, as you mentioned, as you said, I get to teach CEOs how to lead with military confidence.
What an amazing story. And wow, stretching back so far that you're actually following in your father's footsteps, but doing things he was unable to do, and helping him to fulfill his dream vicariously through you, and then discovering your teaching passion and leadership. I just think it's an awesome story.
Yeah. You tap into a really great point right there. I never really thought of this, about how a lot of leadership is fulfilling this idea that, no one ever arrives to where they are alone. I was doing the things I was doing, and I continue to do the things I'm doing because there's somebody or a group of people that I don't want to let down. At that place in my life, I wanted to serve my father. If you think about an Alexander the Great, well, you can't talk about Alexander the Great without talking about Philip of Macedon, his father, right? I wanted to serve my dad. I did that. I wanted to serve my airmen, the ones that I got to make an impact on, my prior students and my graduates. They looked up to me as their leader, as their NCO for those 24 academic days. And they were the ones that believed that I was going to be achieving greater things in my life. So I'm like doing this not only for me, first and foremost, but leadership is about not wanting to let people down because you care about them and they care about you, and you respect them because they respect you. And it's a two-way street.
What a powerful distinction, and what a great vision for what leadership should be in business and in military. Let's dispel a myth right away, because when we say that you teach CEOs how to lead with military confidence, a lot of people are going to go to Hollywood movies where they see the drill sergeant, screaming at the new recruits, and that's their idea of military leadership. What's it really about military confidence? How does that translate into the business world?
I'll tell you what gives me military confidence, man. Your show intro. I was listening to that and I was like, dude, I belong with my torso out of the sunroof of a vehicle being driven by someone else, shirt off, machine gun at my hip. Dude. I was ready, man. But military, you ask a great question. So one thing that I refer a lot to in a lot of my training and a lot of my one-to-ones are mental models. Now, we go through things, we experience things in life, we're confronted with problems, challenges, confrontation, people. When these things are presented, where we go cognitively is back to our mental models. We consult all the models, we consult what's going on in our mental board of directors, and this is happening at a rapid rate. In fact, in the military and law enforcement, we call this an OODA loop. And the OODA loop is an acronym which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Now, that's just one mental model. But in that observe and orient step, once we orient, we're preparing to decide on one of the tools that we use or that we're going to use in a given situation. So what I go through, if it's a day-long session with some key executives of a company, or if it's a one-to-one with a CEO, or if it's one of my Vistage speaking opportunities, Vistage being the company that sends me around the U.S. and asks me to speak to their groups of CEO masterminds, I get to talk about and break down different mental models so that, hey, situation occurs, this is the one that you can potentially reach for. Problem is presented, my perspective being, hey, why don't you try consulting this framework? And being able to rapidly go to a framework in any situation when it comes to confrontation or a difficult personnel situation, I believe that leaders are the ones that know how to step back, slow things down, and then be able to choose the right tool on their tool belt.
Wow, that's really powerful. Give us an example of a mental model that would be useful for a CEO or someone just running their business, and they encounter one of those problems or obstacles or a people issue. What's a great mental model that they could follow?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I used to talk about as an Airman Leadership School instructor was, I mentioned it a couple times leading up to this, was confrontation. Now, if I were to ask, hey, confrontation, is it difficult? Yes or no? Most people will say yes, confrontation is difficult. My theory behind that is because most people are introverted. A lot of people are more reflective as opposed to being boisterous and extroverted.
Yeah, that's me. By the way, you're speaking my language. I hate confrontation. I kind of shut down in confrontation if I'm not careful. And it's really difficult to step up and be a leader in that confrontational situation because I am introverted and I try to avoid it. And that's probably not the best response and maybe not fulfilling my leadership role.
Well, I would contend that you're not trying to avoid it. You may prefer more time to analyze the situation. And that's what I'm finding in most introverted leaders and managers or CEOs. I'm finding that they like to have a little bit more time to ask the right questions, to search or look for the response, get all the data they can before making a decision. Now, here's what we know about leadership. You don't always have the time that you want to execute. So one of the mental models that I talk about is what I call the 4 T's of confrontation. Now, the 4 T's of confrontation basically says, hey, when you are confronted with a difficult situation when it comes to people, when it's a difficult situation when it comes to an interpersonal problem, when you have to talk to somebody, if you can consult these 4 T's, you will have a less challenging time. You will have a more fluid time when it comes to talking with that individual or that team or that group. The 4 T's are basically this. Number 1, total picture. Total picture. Now, I bring that up because here's what's happened many times in my military career. Hey, Sarge, I got a problem. All right, let's send in the cavalry. That's the response. No questions asked. Not even like, what's the problem? Who's it with? What's going on? Yeah. A lot of people, it's like that. I forget the name of the movie. It was a movie done back in the 80s. It was a great movie where the scene where this guy, he speeds into the parking lot of a bar. He parks his car in the parking lot. He runs into the bar. He runs to the barman and he says, quick, I need a remedy for the hiccups. And the barman just kind of looks at him, stares blankly. He reaches under his bar. He grabs a wet bar rag, and then he slaps him across the face with the bar rag. And he kind of drops the bar rag. He feels real proud about himself. He looks at the guy and he says, "You got the hiccups now?" And the guy just kind of rubs his face and he goes, "Well, no, I never had the hiccups in the first place. It was for my wife in the car." He totally missed the total picture. He didn't ask the questions. Here's what I learned about the total picture. Here's what I learned in the military, Ralph. Here's what great leaders do. They ask questions. And you know what else they do after they ask questions? They listen. And you know what they do after they listen? They ask more questions. And then they listen some more. And then they ask more questions. And then they respond. So total picture, being able to understand what's going on. Be very cautious of anybody who wants to give you an answer or a solution after you ask them a question. If they're not asking questions to your question or clarifying, there's something going on there that they're not seeing. So number one, total picture. Number two, timing. Timing is very important. Is there a right time to confront and a wrong time to confront? Absolutely. So being able to, and there was a wonderful quote, I think by Dorothy Neville, which said something like, the real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing in the right place, but it's to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Who's ever said the wrong thing at the tempting moment? I know I have.
Oh, I have messed that up many times. Yeah. Many times.
So it's not necessarily about the timing with which to confront. Maybe it's too early. Maybe it's too late. Maybe in the moment, saying that thing isn't necessarily the most effective thing to bring a resolution to that conflict or that confrontation of the issue. So total picture timing. The third one being tone. Is tone important? I mean, I'm talking to a professional guy in radio. Is tone important?
Yeah, absolutely. Tonality and there's so many different ways to say one thing that can be taken in a myriad of ways. It's absolutely important.
Yes. And tone is even important in text messages, dude. It's like if you forget to drop an emoji or if you put a period in a place that maybe a period doesn't belong, you're sending the wrong message.
Yeah, same thing with email. I get sometimes I get these real terse emails from people that are really great, but they're not aware of how they're coming across in email. So I put a lot of smiley faces in my email, not because I think it's necessarily professional, but because
we're missing context.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a certain tone across, and I don't want people to be freaked out by reading a one-dimensional message fragment, which is independent of any context. So that's a great point in writing as well as in speaking.
Yeah, you're spot on. So tone being the third one, and then the last one being temperature. And if I ask my audience, if I ask myself, have I ever gone into a situation hot? The answer is absolutely. There have been times where I didn't let myself cool down. There have been times where I forgot in a situation, in a conversation, I can choose to either be the thermostat, the one who's affected by the temperature, or I could choose to be the thermometer, I could choose to be the thermometer who can change the tone or the temperature of the conversation. I don't want to be the thermostat that's affected. I don't want to be the thermometer that's affected, I should say. I want to be the thermostat.
Gotcha.
So knowing that I do have more power in a situation than I perceive is a huge way to understand and to guide how a conflict can go. So that's just one of those models. I love the responses I get with this one because, I think that, okay, here, let's peel the layers of the onion back. Why is this important? Well, it's because we are so complex as human beings. We are not creatures of logic. We are creatures of emotion. So returning back to the logical brain when it's necessary to turn back to the logical brain is absolutely vital in any leadership situation.
That is so powerful and so appropriate. I really love how you're taking these principles and applying them not just in military situations, but in business, in life, in relationships. It really touches every area of life. When you work with CEOs to teach them how to lead with military confidence, what does that look like? What tools, what resources do you make available that our listeners would be interested in?
Dude, wonderful question. My answer to you is stories, man. Stories. Stories stick. Principles fade. Stories make up the fabric of our lives. We live in stories. So I can share the 4 T's of confrontation. I could share the 4 I's of transformational leadership. I can talk about B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning theory. I could talk about all these cool mental models that are great tools. But if I'm not sharing a relevant story of how this has worked for me, then I've lost my audience. If I'm not sharing a relevant story on how this has worked for me, then I've lost the opportunity to really synergize these lessons and these principles with how applicable it is in one's own life, in one's own business, in one's own family, in one's own team.
I love it. I love it. What are you working on right now, Mahyar, has got you really excited that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, man. Great question. So right now I'm in the middle of alpha testing a leadership academy. So in the same way that I got to take 16 students, 16 junior airmen for 24 academic days and teach them and share my perspectives and experiences with them, I've been really pushed by my mentors, and real mentors are going to light the fire under you, right? I've been pushed by being reminded of the fact that, hey, Mahyar, you have this military expertise, you have the background. That is what you would benefit from leveraging. For you to say, hey, I'm going to create a leadership academy for millennials, or if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to create a success boot camp for millennials, you are tapping into all of these CEOs who are not necessarily, not all of them are not necessarily millennials, but they would love to have their teams, their execs, their staff, their employees have a little bit of military discipline rub off on them. So right now I'm in the middle of creating a leadership academy where we have an offsite, and I can share not only my perspectives, but I have staff and team members and business partners on board to be able to pour themselves into the attendees. And what does that look like? Well, here's what it looks like. I want to be able to take people through a transformational military leadership experience. What I have a vision for is to show them the embodiment of leadership, what it manifests into as a visual act. And I had a great Air Force supervisor tell me, man, he looked at me dead in the eye when he taught me a great leadership lesson. He said, Mahyar, leadership is visual. It's a visual responsibility. It's a visual act. He said, so when you're a leader, when you're a non-commissioned officer, when you're a staff sergeant, it's not what you say to people that makes you effective. And I'll never forget this. He took his index finger and he drilled it right into the center of my chest. He said, it's what they see in you. And he held up that finger right in front of my face. And he said, Mahyar, airmen don't want to follow your finger. Airmen want to follow you. And he pointed right at me. And man, just talking about that to this day gives me chills.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a powerful lesson. And that is applicable to anyone, anywhere, in business, in life, in military, in relationships, even in families where you're trying to lead children and lead teenagers and young adults. I support you 1,000% with this Leadership Academy. It is so needed. And I hope that our listeners will look you up and will get more information about this and really begin to wrap their heart around this idea of leadership, really caring about other people, really building a business that can care about customers and care about clients and care about prospects, bringing that level of leadership to business. I think it's so critical. And I really appreciate you, Mahyar, for taking the lead in creating these leadership opportunities. So this is really amazing.
Thank you, man.
Any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you would like to leave our listeners with?
You know, you really touched on it, man. You said something very key, which was this is no easy task. This is a challenge because it's like, I used to sit my airmen down when I had my initial feedbacks with them, when I got to meet them for the first time and they got to meet me. And one of the things I used to tell them was, dude, I am never going to ask you to do something or go somewhere that I haven't done myself or I haven't been myself either. Everything that I ask you to do, everything that I ask you to consider, I'm currently doing in my own life. And people look for that. Do you practice what you preach? Because if you don't, you have no business preaching what you practice. And I believe that leadership is hard work and it's heart work. And I'm up to some heart work in my life right now. And I got some great people behind me that see the vision as clearly as I do. I had a great general I worked for while I was in the Air Force. His name was Mark Welsh. He was the chief of staff for some time. And General Welsh, he said something I loved. He said that leadership is a gift and it's given by those who follow, but you got to be worthy of it. And man, talk about lessons that stay with you for the rest of your life. You got to be worthy of it. And we're going back into that same concept. Master Sergeant Jason Mitchell, hey, it's not what you say that makes you effective, Mahyar. It's what they see in you. You got to be worthy of it, because people are placing their trust, their love, their respect, and their lives in your hands, their well-being. There is no greater honor to have someone's trust, love, and respect. And for them to say without saying it, you make me feel safe. Thank you. That's huge for me, man. That's huge. I got to have that honor and that privilege 7 times a year for 24 days, every time I had a new class of airmen. And the return on that investment just keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. It keeps coming back, because I get all these thank yous and all these praises and these messages of gratitude saying, dude, you made an impact, man. If there's, you talked about this in the beginning, if there's any sort of intrinsic fuel that I'm riding off of, it's that, bro. There's no other thing in my life aside from my daughter that keeps me going as much as that keeps me going.
Yeah. And I've got 2 adult daughters, but daughters will hone your skills.
Yeah. Wow. You're right, man.
More so than a room full of CEOs will. Well, this has really been great. Been speaking with Mahyar Rostami. He is a U.S. military veteran. He's a leadership consultant and a certified speaker for Vistage Worldwide, as well as the John C. Maxwell Team. And he's the founder of Build Your Vibe. He teaches CEOs how to lead with military confidence. You can find out more at buildyourvibe.com. Mahyar, it has really been a pleasure to connect with you. I support you 1,000%. Thank you so much for being on Rebelpreneur Radio today. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Ralph. Thank you so much. If anyone wants to catch what's going on at the forefront of everything in my world, not only my website, but they could follow me on the gram. That's at the Persian Champion. And everything that I'm doing, everything I'm currently up to is being shared there.
Awesome. All right. We'll have that link on the website as well. Mahyar, thank you so much.
Dude, thanks again, man. Talk to you soon, brother.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.